Stanford University.
Hi. Welcome to the seminar on People, Computers, and Design. I'm Terry Winograd, and we are now well underway in our series for the quarter, and I've started lining up people for next quarter. So we're going to have lots of exciting speakers coming up. Next week, we have Peter Paroli from what's now called PARC, used to be called Xerox PARC. And he has been working along with his colleagues there for a number of years on what they call information foraging theory. So there's a practice of going on the web, following links, finding things, and so on. And their question is, how can you understand the overall patterns of that? Not just the details of what you click and where you go, but how do you get what they call information scent? Something which tells you there's likely to be good information somewhere down a certain track if you follow it. And then how do you manage multiple alternatives of scent and so on. So Peter will be talking on that next week. This week we have James Garrett from Adaptive Path, who has been at the heart of what I see as the sort of evolution of the web. Some of you who are older will remember that when the web started out, it was a text-only device for linking things between physicists. It sort of migrated from there fairly quickly with Mosaic to becoming a way that people could share pages that had a bunch of text and some pictures on them. And from there, it got moved to the next stage, which was you could just not just have pictures, but you could actually have nice layouts. They have tables, and they added all sorts of stuff, so you could actually make the pages control how they looked. And people realized that just this basic notion, which was the original web notion of click on a link, see a page, click on a link, see a page, was not adequate for these more interesting pages. For example, anybody who's taken any of our HCI courses knows that if you click on a button, you should get immediate feedback that your click has been effective even before it goes off and does what it's going to do. Well, given the lag on the web, that wouldn't happen unless you had a little bit of client-side processing. So they said, well, we better add a little client-side processing so you can do some stuff. We'll make up this hokey language called JavaScript, call it JavaScript even though it's not Java for unknown reasons, and people can sort of dress up what's going on with what's in JavaScript. Well, as we all know in computing, things that start off as a sort of little add-on end up taking on a life of their own. And once people had the power to do client-side programming, they realized that you could do a lot more on a web page than just have a place to click to go to more web pages. And today, those of you who use something like Gmail or any of the online apps and so on realize that the web is not about clicking and going to pages. It really is a vehicle for complete programming. JavaScript has blown up into a huge language with all sorts of property, all sorts of features, all sorts of things you can do. And what Jesse was one of the real originators of was the idea and the methods for doing that kind of programming, what's now called, and I think you were the one who coined the term, AJAX, asynchronous Java and XML, right? That's using the JavaScript, I say Java, asynchronous JavaScript and XML, using a standard for transmitting things, a standard language. And the asynchronous is important because it means what's going on over the web, which has its own timing properties, is decoupled from what's going on your screen, which you want to have user-based timing properties. So that was really, from my point of view, the move from a web-centric view to a user-centric view. His company, Adaptive Path, has been at the forefront of innovations in web design and in coming up with new ways, new interaction methods for the web. And today he'll be talking about Aurora.
Thank you, Terry. Hi, everybody. Everybody can hear me okay? Nice quiet room. So I usually have to introduce myself, so I'm going to very briefly kind of do that anyway. My name is James Garrett. I'm not a technologist, actually. I'm a designer, and I have to confess that probably pretty much everybody in this room would be able to put me to shame in terms of your technical expertise. I started out designing websites in the mid-90s, and in that work got really interested in the principles of designing for what was then a brand new medium, and we were all trying to figure out what it was going to take to create websites that really worked effectively for people. And as a result of some of that work, I wrote a book in 2001 called The Elements of User Experience, which describes some of my ideas and my philosophy about delivering user experience on the web. In 2001, I started my own company, Adaptive Path. We're a consulting firm based up in San Francisco. We started out designing websites, and what we've seen over the course of the last several years is that really the set of tools that we have kind of developed as a community, those of us who have been working on the web for a while, that set of tools really has a much broader application than just the web. And now we have found ourselves getting more involved in designing other kinds of software products, as well as now designing hardware technology products and designing experiences in the broader sense. And all of that informed this project that I'm going to tell you about today, a project called Aurora. So I'm very fortunate in that I have the opportunity to travel around a lot and speak with audiences like this one, and hear from people about the challenges that they're facing in designing the products that they're working on. One of the people that I met at a conference a while back was this person. This is Mitchell Baker. She is I believe her current title is President and Chairman of the Mozilla organization. And we met at a conference last year, and we got to talking about the challenges that were facing her and her organization. As most of you, I'm sure, know, Mozilla is responsible for the Firefox web browser. It's an open source project, and in many ways, it's probably the most successful open source project ever. It's got hundreds of millions of users all over the world. It's the result of volunteer contributions from a vast community of developers who have all made the product possible. And as I was talking with Mitchell about the challenges that they were facing as an organization, she said, the real trouble is that we've been so successful. We've been so successful that it's very difficult for us to take the long view on anything that we do, because we're just scrambling to keep up with meeting the needs of the hundreds of millions of users that we now have, and now managing what is one of the largest scale open source projects ever attempted. And we got to talking about the challenge of doing that kind of long-term planning, and I said, well, actually, my company Adaptive Path, this is one of the main services that we offer to our clients, and we have, I think we had a lot in common sort of culturally with the Mozilla organization, because we at Adaptive Path, we really have built our reputation on being open about our ideas and sharing our ideas with the larger community of experienced designers. And so we felt that there was some compatibility there, and we thought that this might be a really unique opportunity for us to donate some of our time to the Mozilla organization to help them do some long-term planning and long-term thinking about not just the future of their product Firefox, but really the future of their entire product category, the browser, and maybe the future of the web itself. And so what we decided to do, the way that we wanted to capture our ideas about the future of the web was through something called a design concept video or a design concept movie. And this is something that has a really a kind of a long and storied history. The earliest one that I could think of, I'm sure there are older ones, the earliest one that I could think of was this one produced by Frigidaire in 1956, showing off the kitchen of the future. Not showing real products that were going to be coming to market, but demonstrating ideas and demonstrating possibilities about where technology could take us. In the technology industry, probably the most famous video of this type was the one produced by Apple in 1987 called Knowledge Navigator. And Knowledge Navigator was their vision of the future of personal computing, and it's really interesting to look at it now, 20-odd years later, and see how many of the ideas that were embedded in Knowledge Navigator did come to fruition in some way, even though the specific details of the design, the specific details of the technology turned out totally different. But the video that probably had the most influence on us as a design team was a video created by Sun Microsystems back in 1994 called Starfire. And Starfire was, in some ways, an attempt to take that, the Knowledge Navigator, some of the seeds of the ideas in Knowledge Navigator to the next level. Sun, of course, had a very heavy emphasis on networking as being the foundation for computing, and this was their attempt to imagine kind of what this future world would be like. And so they produced this 15-minute video. It told this little story of corporate politics and infighting and how using technology to accomplish these goals. So we felt that in order to really envision the web of the future, we needed to provide a lot of context, not just drawing some screens of what a web browser might look like, but really showing that technology in the larger context of people's lives, and that's why we chose to do a video. But that context problem became a real challenge for us because we initially sat down to start working on the project, and we thought, well, it's a web browser. How complicated is it? As a piece of software, it's not really much more challenging than any other piece of software from a design perspective. But as we started thinking about it, we started thinking about what the implications were when we start to project out. We'd initially set for ourselves this 10-year time horizon. What's the web browser of 2018 look like? We said, well, the web browser of 2018 is really going to have to work a lot like the other user interfaces that people see in that world of 2018. But those user interfaces are going to have to be applied in the context of what's happening with technology and what's happening with the web at that time. And really, to understand those things, we had to put those in the context of the entire world of the future. So our design problem had kind of ballooned out to this great big challenge, and we really didn't know exactly what to do, because we as designers and as consultants, what we frequently find is we're able to do effective work when we are able to very clearly define what the constraints of the problem are. What are the boundaries of the problem space? When we can identify those constraints, identify those boundaries, that's how we know what constitutes an effective solution. But in trying to imagine the world of the future, well, that could be anything, right? It was literally without constraint. And so we realized that what we needed to do was establish for ourselves, define that world, and then we could work backward and define how the web and the browser itself fit into that world. And so we decided to turn to some outside help. We brought in this fellow. His name is James Garrett, and he is a professional futurist. This guy gets paid to think about what's going to happen in the future. And his specialty is in working. They hire him to come in and facilitate these discussions about the direction of their business, the direction of their industry, and help them project out some scenarios for what might happen. And then these corporations use that in their strategic planning efforts. So we asked him to do this for us, and he came in and he volunteered some of his time, and he brought in a group of experts that he frequently draws on as participants in these conversations that he facilitates with corporations, along with designers from Adaptive Path and some folks from the Mozilla organization as well. And we all got together to talk about what the world of the future was going to be like, talking about technology trends, talking about social trends, talking about all of the different possible influences that might shape that world of 2018. And out of that, we started developing kind of these timelines for the evolution of some of the important characteristics of technology and characteristics of the browser that were going to influence the design work that we were going to be doing. And so out of these working sessions that James led for us, we really developed kind of these three major themes that we thought were going to be the big factors that would drive or influence the design of this web browser of the future. And the first of these is a concept that we called augmented reality, or we didn't call it that, it already had that name, but the idea that there's this invisible world of data all around us, and technology is now starting to evolve to the point where that invisible world of data can be exposed to us as we move through the world. And we can connect with that data in meaningful ways. Maybe not exactly like this screenshot from Terminator 2, but in very similar kinds of ways, being able to see the data that's already kind of inherent in the world all around us, closing the gap between the web and the world. The second big trend that we thought was going to be an important factor was this notion that we called data abundance. Now, there's more data available to us all the time. The volume of data that each of us produces now is more than ever. Both the data that we produce explicitly as a kind of a publishing activity on the web or with our colleagues in all of our email and our blogs and our Twitters and so on, but also all of the data that is more and more available to us that is sort of implicitly generated from our activities. All of the data about our lives that we kind of throw off in our wake as we move through the world. We now have more and more sophisticated ways to gather and analyze that data. So, you know, a lot of people, when I've talked with them about the Aurora concept, they say, I don't want more data. I've got too much data already. I want less data. Because this is a hedge fund manager on Wall Street, and this is his world. All of these screens full of data. This is his bubble of data that he lives in every day. Now, I don't know about you, but that doesn't necessarily feel to me like the kind of life that I really want to be living. So the challenge for technology is not, you know, making more data available to us, but helping us make sense of data, helping us filter data and refine data and turn that data into meaning for us. The third big theme that came out was this notion of virtual identity, that people are increasingly expected to have a presence in the digital world, that in some spheres, in some ways, if you're not findable on the web, there's a sense in which you're not really a full participant in the world. If you're not actively engaged in the digital realm in some meaningful way. So this is the avatar creation screen from Second Life, which is one way that people project an identity into the world, but it's just one of a lot of different ways, where we're all in some ways kind of expressing ourselves and our lives through the digital medium. So all of these themes kind of came together in influencing the design of Aurora. I'm going to show you the first part of the video to start to see some of the elements, specific elements of the design that tie back to these major themes.
Oh, the Cubs lost again? Hey, Alan, what do you mean, small harvest? We outproduced you guys last season, and we're on track to do even better this year.
The latest government weather data says you're in for more rain, and that can't be good for your crops after the last couple of months.
Well, I'm afraid you've been misinformed, my friend. You may be seeing a lot of rain up your way, but around these parts, it's been nice and sunny.
Look, I've got the data right here. Well, here, maybe this will help. See, right here? Oh, that's way too much rain for your crops.
Now, wait a minute. You know we're not getting more rain than usual. Hang on, I'll show you. got to be here somewhere. Well, I guess I haven't looked at this in a while. See, the rainfall we've been getting here at the farm is way lower.
You're right.
Say, do you mind if I share this with my neighbors?
No problem. And it looks like you might outproduce me again this year.
You better believe it.
We'll see. Talk to you later.
Now, about those cubs. Guess I'll have to find out about the game on the tractor.
This scene introduces most of the core concepts in the Aurora design. The hand cursor allows users to manipulate elements in the browser as they would objects in the physical world. They can grab, lift, push, pull, and drop anything. The browser interface is completely hidden unless it is invoked by the user, either in the form of the radial menu, seen here when Jill responds to Alan's text message, or in the form of the frame, seen later in this scene. Alan invites Jill to join him on a particular web page, so they can examine and work with the data on that page collaboratively. His cursor moves off screen for a second and returns with a presentation object, which can render any valid data set as a line graph. When Alan pulls the presentation object over the data table, we see for a brief moment a purple highlight, indicating that the data on the page is a valid match for that presentation object. The frame appears around the edges of the screen and has four major components. The shelf across the top provides access to frequently used objects. The history stack on the left provides a reverse chronological set of recently used objects. The user stack on the right provides a reverse chronological temporary storage area for objects the user wants to keep handy. And the wheel at the bottom contains all the objects she's actively connected to right now. Next, we see the spatial view, which applies a few simple rules and tools to enable us to organize people, places, and things on the web as objects in a three-dimensional space. The z-axis, extending away from the viewer, always represents time. When we stop using a page or interacting with a person, they begin to drift steadily away from us. Jill searches her history for her personal weather station, a website on her local network with data specific to her farm. But this is just a record of the page as it existed the last time she accessed it, so she uses a radial menu to get the current version. Then Jill pulls a data object from the page, which contains rainfall data for her farm in a structured, presentation-independent form. She pushes it on top of her user stack so she can retrieve it easily when she gets back to Alan. Before she returns with the data, we see a little bit of how the wheel interacts with the spatial view. As Jill turns the wheel, the spatial view gives greater visual emphasis to the clusters that are most closely related to the object at the center of the wheel at that moment, even though other clusters remain dimly visible. The placement of objects in the spatial view left to right or top to bottom is largely automatic. The browser analyzes the content of everything that flows through it, noting semantic similarities between objects and placing them near one another. These placements can always be adjusted by the user, and the browser will learn from these adjustments. Strong associations between objects are highlighted as clusters, the irregular colored shapes we see surrounding groups of objects. The labels on clusters can be suggested by the browser or created by the user. Jill suggests sharing with her neighbors what she and Alan have created. Finally, we see a seamless transition of the web experience to a mobile device as Jill heads out to the field. So in all of the different ideas that we generated in the course of doing this design work, we really kept coming back to these four major themes, these ideas that we thought were really going to be central to any concept that was going to work in this world that we had envisioned. The first of those is something that we call context awareness. Because if you think about it, really, it's hard to imagine another product that we use in the course of our lives that has the potential to know more about us, to know more about our interests, to know more about our activities, because so much of what flows through the browser is so rich with detail that if the browser could pay attention to that detail and respond to it in meaningful ways, it could enable us to do a lot more with it. Finding patterns in our use of the web, finding patterns in the information sources and applications that we access through the web to deliver a more meaningful experience to us. The second one of these themes is what we call natural interaction, because technology historically has always been to some extent about abstraction, that users would have always had to learn the world of the system and adapt themselves to it. But what we're seeing more and more as technology becomes more powerful is that it is enabling us to create interactions that feel more like interactions that we have with our natural environment, that we're able to use our natural cognitive abilities for visual recognition and spatial navigation to be able to manage our interactions with technology. The third one was this concept that we called continuity, the idea that the browser, your relationship with the browser is, your relationship with the web is kind of ongoing. You're never starting from scratch, but that it remembers who you are and what you've been doing with it, no matter what device you're using to access the web. So in this first scene, we saw that transition from the desktop to a mobile device, and the mobile device picks up exactly where the user left off on the desktop, because the idea is not that your interaction is unique to the device, it's that your interaction is with the web itself. And then lastly, we have this concept that we called multi-user applications, because really the paradigm that we've had to date that is so implicit in everything that we do in designing software that it's practically invisible to us is the idea that a piece of software is being used by one person at a time, or that interaction is only taking place between a single user and the piece of software. And we felt that one of the really kind of eye-opening things for the entire technology industry about the web is the way in which applications fundamentally change when you have lots of people using them, or lots of people using them, or multiple people using them simultaneously. And so we wanted to explore how we could build the idea of every application being multi-user by default into the browser itself. So we went through this extensive process of sketching lots of different ideas for an interface paradigm that could incorporate all of these different design themes, as well as be responsive to the technology trends that we saw coming out of the forecasting workshops. And this is one concept sketch kind of from the middle of the somewhere in the middle of the design process, where at this point we had pretty well refined the basic user interface constructs, but we were still trying to work out exactly how it worked, and this is sort of a top-down view of the user looking into this space of all of these objects on the web. And in this early version of it, the wheel was actually an object that sort of encircled the user, kind of like this hula hoop of their activities that was all around them, and that they could just kind of spin it around to select their focus. We ended up changing that in the final design to the wheel curving away from the viewer to kind of create that sense that that the content was all over there, we had this kind of sense that it would make people a little bit uncomfortable to feel like there was stuff happening behind them that they couldn't see. So all of this comes together into the main Aurora user interface, the spatial view. And here you see a couple of those themes come into play. The notion of context awareness is really, really big here, because that wheel it's not, it visually has some resemblance to something like a tab bar or maybe the dock in Mac OS X, but functionally it serves a really important different purpose, which is that the wheel is how you tell the browser what your current context is. By selecting an object in the wheel, by pulling an object to the center of the wheel, you're telling the browser, this is what I'm interested in right now, this is what I'm focused on right now. And the browser will change its representation of all of the objects in that spatial view to give emphasis to the things that are most contextually relevant to what you're doing right now. It's almost as if you walked into a library, and as you walked through the door, the library kind of read your mind as to what the subject of interest was that you had when you walked in, and it turned all of the books that were not about that invisible. And so everything is still spatially in exactly the same place, because we want to be able to rely on people's spatial navigation capacity and spatial memory in order for them to be able to relocate things. But we only show you the things that are directly relevant to what's going on with you right now at this moment. That visual and spatial organization, again, is part of that theme of natural interaction that we have here, trying to minimize the abstraction. So you're not managing lists here at all, but you're kind of pushing objects around in a space. One of the big questions that we got when we put all these videos out on the web, and we released a lot of the supporting design documentation from our process, and one of the big questions that we got from people was, well, is this a web browser or is this an operating system? Because it seems like all of the things that are shown here could just as easily apply to local resources as to resources out on the web. And really the conclusion that we reached is that it really doesn't matter fundamentally. Whether or not this is operating system functionality or web browser functionality, what we're projecting with this is some form of convergence of those. Whether it's an operating system that takes on attributes of a web browser, or a web browser that takes on attributes of an operating system, was not actually an interesting question to us from a design perspective. On this weather service web page, we see that concept of multi-user applications in action, where you have multiple cursors on the screen simultaneously, people taking data from their own sources and putting them together and manipulating that data in a real-time collaborative environment. And again, here we see that concept of continuity as we move to the mobile device, which presents more or less the same interface, but it has been tweaked slightly to accommodate the fact that it's going to be a smaller screen and that it's going to be the user is going to be using their fingers rather than a cursor to be able to manipulate the elements in the browser. We see more of what we can do with a mobile device here in the second part of the Aurora video.
Well, at least we've had nice weather for our vacation. Well, mostly anyway. What do you want to do next?
Let's see what's nearby.
Where's that event calendar you found online before we left?
Here it is. That's a lot. Let's narrow it down.
There's an art exhibit a few blocks away.
We've been on our own all morning. Let's do something more social.
How about this wine and cheese tasting?
Sounds good.
How are we going to get there?
MapQuest says we can take the shortest route, the most scenic, or the one with the most personal interest.
We've got some time to kill. Let's see what it recommends along the personal interest route.
There's a bike shop, which I'm sure you'll want to see. Oh, and look. It says this bookstore has a copy of the book on pottery that I put on my wish list last week.
Sounds great. Let's go.
Oh, wait a second. Let's see if anybody else from the tour group is nearby to join us at the wine and cheese tasting.
Let's see if Moira and Patrick want to come along.
This scene looks at how awareness of the user's location might shape the experience of the web on a mobile device. In the spatial view at the beginning, location becomes another factor determining which objects are visible. The browser gives prominence to the vacation cluster because it knows that the users are away from home. The character Beth uses location data from the mobile device to help filter a long list of events. Representing the location data as an object in the frame gives the user direct physical control of which sites have access to that data. The mobile device presents an interface virtually identical to the one we saw on the desktop computer in the first scene. The proportions of elements have changed to accommodate both the smaller screen and the fact that users manipulate objects with their fingertips, not a cursor. The mapping site recommends routes based not only on location data from the mobile device, but also on personal data shared from other sites, such as a bookstore wish list. Beth pulls the event from the web page as a data object. This triggers purple highlights on every object in the frame that is a valid recipient for the event. Her friends are represented by a group object, which bundles multiple objects together into a single representation. The act of dropping the event object on her friends effectively invites them to the event. So one of the challenges that we had in putting this video together was that we had so many possibilities, so many different kinds of interactions that we were interested in showing, and different aspects of the user interface that we thought were important to show off. And so trying to articulate all of the different possible interactions, prioritize them, and then pull those together into meaningful, plausible scenarios was something that actually took us a lot longer than we expected it to. And so we went through this process of first sort of generating all of these different use cases that we might be incorporated in the video, trying to cluster those in meaningful ways and set some priorities. But we also had this challenge that we kind of set for ourselves, which is that we looked at a lot of these other design concept videos, and we found ourselves kind of amused by the cliches that we saw kind of recurring over and over again. Many of them revolve around knowledge workers, people in an office who spend all of their time in front of a computer. Many of them involved these sort of where they were showing any kind of recreational use of technology. We were looking at sort of affluent professionals who were all really kind of in their early to mid 30s, and they were all really good looking, and they were all clearly living this sort of dream lifestyle, and they had these really clean modern homes with great architecture and stuff like that. And we really wanted to show in our video the way that this technology impacts people in every aspect of their lives, and all different kinds of people, which is why we start out with a farmer, and then we move on to an older couple on vacation, getting away from young people in their 20s who are out trying to find a bar to go to or something like that. So again, in transporting that design from the desktop to the mobile, what we're really trying to show is that continuity of design, and how the same set of design principles can really apply regardless of screen size, regardless of the input methods that are available. And but the context awareness becomes a much more important factor here in the mobile, because we now have a device that can exist in many different physical contexts, and trying to leverage that knowledge of physical context and take advantage of it, and then look at how that knowledge of physical context can influence the services that are delivered over the web. So we have the user explicitly sharing their location data with a website in order for that website to provide them with better information. So one of the things in all of this that we were doing was just trying to imagine what the technological landscape was going to be like that would enable all of these interactions that we were imagining. And really, we were very optimistic about the future of technology in this. We really imagined that everything was going to get better. Processors were just going to get faster and faster all the time. Everybody was going to have more and more storage available to them. We were talking about a terabyte in your pocket and a petabyte on your desktop. Bandwidth increasing more and more, being just more broadly available to everyone. But I think that that aside from these three, the one advance in technology that we imagined would have the greatest impact on our design was the advance in graphics capabilities for technology products. In a lot of ways, the power from a graphics perspective that's available now in your typical mobile device is already outstripped what many desktop computers could do only a few years ago. And as these graphics capabilities increase, it opens up more possibilities for us to do more interesting things and visually with the design of our products, and enabling us to do things that enable more of those kind of natural interactions, visual and spatial organization of information, to create more of a sense of a world that is more like our own, a world that has it has a physics and it has a space of its own. We see a little bit more of that here in part 3 of the Aurora video.
What do you think of these as a birthday present for Lori?
Isn't her birthday again already? She must be 4 or 5 by now.
7.
I see. Well, let's take a look. I don't know. They look kind of cheap. I would hate to get her another present that wore out in the first 2 weeks. Her mother will never forgive us.
Why don't you check it out on the web? Let's see the reviews.
Soft yet durable. Let's buy them. Here is a credit card.
Say, we should remind Tim about Lori's birthday.
Better remind Kelly to remind him.
Good point. Let me just find Kelly.
This scene is about integrating the web with the physical environment. When the character takes a picture of the slippers, he also captures a unique identifier for them through RFID or some similar technology. He then shares that identifier with a couple of different websites by using a workspace, a browser feature that allows users to pull together different sites and enable those sites to expose data to one another. In this case, the identifier from the slippers on the right side of the workspace is read by the two services on the left, one providing product information and the other providing customer reviews. The credit card is an object in the browser like any other, but here we're suggesting it could be used for physical transactions as well as virtual ones. The spatial view usually contains people, places, and things all mixed in together, but here we see the character use the people filter in the lower left corner of the frame to get a view that only shows people. So we had done other kinds of videos in the past to illustrate design concepts, but they were usually pretty simple and not very complex and really focused on just showing screen interactions. With this project, because we were trying to show so much of the context of use to help people really understand how this technology was going to fit into people's daily lives, we kind of got in over our heads a little bit. We suddenly realized that we had taken on a challenge that was more complex than we had ever really faced. We suddenly realized that we had to do location scouting, trying to find places where we could shoot this video. We had to do casting. We had to hire actors to come in and play these various parts. We had to do prop fabrication for the mobile device as well as the desktop screen. We had people who, so this was in the toy store in San Francisco, where they were very kind to let us completely disrupt one whole corner of the store for an afternoon for us to shoot that last segment. And really just so many logistical details involved in really trying to accurately capture and convey that context, because we felt that communicating that context was so important for people to really understand the design. The one important, I think, element of the design that's shown off in this segment is this concept of the workspace, really putting the user in control of the web experience in a fundamental way, where we see, instead of these monolithic websites or web applications, that the web becomes sort of fractured or fragmented into this array of different services that can be mixed and matched in the browser, kind of as these Lego bricks that you can snap together to create a custom set of functionality on the fly according to your immediate needs. And now part 4.
Oh hey, I got a message from Patrick. Don't forget to buy a present for Lori's birthday.
I totally forgot. Can I do that now?
Sure, I was just killing time until you got home anyway.
Okay, let's see.
You bought some new data glasses?
Oh, that was for work. Here it is. It wants my personal information to make recommendations, but I'm not buying this for me.
Maybe you should just ask Lori's mom what to get her.
Always want to do things the hard way. I'll see if she's online. Hey sis, how's it going?
Hey guys, what's up?
We're looking for a present for Lori, but we don't know what she would like.
Well, 7 is a tricky age. I can hardly keep up with her anymore.
We're getting her feed, but it's mostly cat pictures. Unless she hasn't authorized us for our whole feed.
Come on, she's only 7. She doesn't have any secrets yet.
Well, we can't get a recommendation from Amazon without her personal information.
Oh, I can give you that.
You can? Won't she be mad?
Of course I can. I'm her mom. The law says I own her data until she turns 18. And anyway, she knows I have access to it.
Wow. I don't know how I'd feel about that.
Well, someday when you guys have a family of your own, you'll understand. Okay, here. This is her web history profile, and I also threw in a fresh scan of toys in her room. See you next Wednesday.
Okay. Let's get this finished so I can find out how the Cubs did this afternoon.
They won!
Finally!
This scene shows how the Aurora design would work on a large screen with a gestural interface. The wall screen contains a camera that can read and interpret the user's gestures. The user literally reaches out to manipulate objects on the screen. The browser will automatically associate objects in the spatial view with keywords based on its analysis of the object's content, as well as the context in which the object is used. But it's not foolproof. The browser can still sometimes place an object incorrectly. Fortunately, correcting a misplaced object is as simple as pushing it to where it belongs, as we see here when the character Tim pushes the data glasses toward the work keyword. The yellow-green highlights seen around some objects in the spatial view are notification highlights, indicating that a resource has changed in some relevant way. For a web page, that change might be an update to a particular piece of information the user is tracking. For a person, it might be a new post to that person's feed, or an object that person has shared with the user. Tim retrieves a workspace containing a shopping site, a price comparison engine, and an image search. Workspaces are created and configured by users, but websites can also provide specialized functionality for use in a workspace. The shopping site requests his social network connections and the semantic profile the browser has developed based on his web activities. The user must explicitly authorize that access, but even then the site's license to use that data will be revoked after 24 hours. Tim mentions that he may not be able to see Lori's entire feed. Publishing tools in the browser provide fine-grained control of who has access to what content in a feed, and people generally assume that feeds contain some content they can't see. Lori's mother shares with Tim a copy of the girl's semantic profile from her browser history and an RFID scan of the girl's toys. The conversation touches on the question of legal ownership of this data. As the owner, Lori's mother can place some very tight restrictions on how Tim can use this copy of the data, while still enabling him to find a good present. So one of the challenges that we faced with this project was that so we had these ideas for what we wanted to do from a user interface perspective that were really beyond our abilities as animators, and so we brought in some professional animators to help us out to do all of the user interface animations that you see in the videos. But one of the challenges of that was that we really had a lot of trouble communicating all of these ideas to them in a way that they could understand it and be able to create these animations that would feel plausible, that would feel like a real UI. All of this, everything that you see here, none of it was done programmatically. All of it was animated by hand, which in retrospect, perhaps we maybe should have written a little bit of code to do some of it. It might have turned out to be a faster way to get to the solution, because it ended up being a real painstaking process for our animators to move all of those little elements individually in the animations. So one thing that we did to help them understand what we were trying to accomplish with the animations in all of their complexity was we set up a video camera in my office, and we pointed the video camera at a whiteboard, and I stood at the whiteboard and kind of acted out all of the different animated sequences in the video. And here's just a little segment I'm going to show you of one of those little video of me at the whiteboard acting out an animation. It becomes this smaller element here in the center. You can still kind of make out what it is. There. And it's in the context of this spatial view, so it's one of a number of objects, and these objects are going to be a variety of shapes and sizes, and for the purpose of this, I'm just going to draw them as circles. There will be all these other objects around, some bigger, some smaller. Some of them very tiny off in the distance, such that they're just kind of little dots. Very hard to see. So we can see on the screen that this National Weather Service webpage is part of a cluster. It's associated with a number of other objects that are all enclosed within this cluster boundary. This cluster has a label on it, and approximately the visual center of the cluster, and that says weather. Basically, a lot of the design tools that we're used to working with as software designers really kind of fell short for us because this user interface was so dynamic. We couldn't use static screenshots to accurately communicate how we wanted to see this browser and this user interface behave. So one of the things that we tried to do over the course of the videos, as you see this sequence of these 4 videos, is we started with interactions that would be more familiar and more comfortable for people. So having someone sitting at a desk in front of a screen with something resembling a mouse that would feel more like the kind of world that we're used to when we think about user interfaces, and then gradually progressing toward the touchscreen interface on the mobile device, which now is something that many of us are more familiar with and more comfortable with, onto this gestural interface that we see with the wall screen. And the other thing in this last segment is again bringing that notion of multi-user applications in here. Really, what you see in all four of the segments is whenever anybody is using the web, other people are kind of always present in that interaction, whether they're two people sitting together at a screen, two people sharing a virtual space, as we saw in that weather service segment at the beginning, or people using the browser for more sort of social interactions. In all of these cases, what we're imagining is this functionality, multi-user functionality, which is now kind of being created on a site-by-site basis across the web, really kind of becomes baked into the web, becomes part of the infrastructure of the web, becomes something that's available through the web browser, and thereby becomes something that all of us, every website can take advantage of, and it just becomes a natural sort of assumed part of how the web works. So this project was something that Mozilla used to launch what they call the Browser Concept Series. The idea being that this would be just one possible vision of the future of the web, and that other people would be able to contribute their own visions, their own ideas about how the browser might evolve and what different kinds of user interface constructs we might see in the future. Because really all we wanted to do with this was provoke some conversation. That we've given it one shot based on a certain set of design principles of what the future could be, but we're not saying that this is what the future definitely will be, because what the future will be is really up to all of us together. So thank you very much for your time and your attention. I do want to reiterate that at this URL, adaptivepath.com/Aurora, you'll find all of the videos as well as extensive documentation of everything that we went through in the design process, a lot more detail about the underlying concepts of the browser, the script for the video, some information about what it took to make a video like this. So check it out. So we have some time for questions.
Sure, I'll get started. So one of the things we saw here in this video was kind of a move away from web applications that have exclusive control of the real estate in your browser towards components that you drag in on demand. And while it's very compelling from the user experience perspective, how do you think you'll actually get to that point to get these places to give up control over the real estate in the browser and give up control over the space where they will show you their ads to then actually make money off their sites?
Right. So the question is given what we saw with the workspaces and the idea of these web services sort of standing alone and giving users the freedom and the power to recombine those services in their own ways, how do we imagine websites being willing to give up total control and dominance of the entire browser real estate, and especially as so many of them have an advertising-based model? And one thing that we didn't really explore was what are the revenue models for the websites of the future. And I think that there was sort of an implicit assumption that somehow maybe these objects are made available for free, maybe these objects are things that you subscribe to in some way. We really didn't explore those possibilities. I think that what we've seen over the course of the history of the web is that openness and interoperability are the things that win out. And our sense is that as these kinds of services become more available, it is going to start to become a bad business move not to provide them in some fashion. Yeah.
The feeling I got from the video was that it was so integrated that it seemed, well, everything was built on top of the browser itself, that it seemed that the browser was becoming more of an operating system, say a cloud operating system like Chrome is kind of going in that direction. Was that one of your aims?
So the question is the browser seeming more like an operating system or a cloud operating system.
Do almost anything without leaving the browser. That looked like the purpose. So.
I wouldn't say that was one of our aims to illustrate here's what a cloud operating system would look like. Rather, it just sort of became this natural outcome of we'd set these sort of design parameters for ourselves. We wanted to see how far we could take them, and we kind of it was pretty late in the process when we looked at it and we said, you know what, there's no reason that this couldn't be applications and documents on a local store as opposed to resources on a network. So we decided that we were just going to keep that line deliberately blurry. Yeah.
Was it, and I want to know a bit more about how high resolution you guys wanted to go in terms of depicting these design functions. I noticed you went with like a stop motion effect as opposed to a video. Intentional. What kind of thinking went into that?
So how high resolution did we want to go, and why stop motion as opposed to full motion video? I think that there were a couple of, I mean, we were working with a very limited budget. We were donating all of our time. Mozilla threw in some money for the production of the video, and full motion video production brings with it another layer of logistical challenges that we weren't ready for, or we just weren't prepared to try to take on. So we felt like what we did with the stop motion photography was a reasonable compromise there. The video ended up coming out, so these videos, if you string them all together and you leave the commentaries out, it's about 9 minutes long. Our original target was 6 minutes, and we just had too much material. In fact, what we ended up shooting was about half of what we originally wrote. The first draft of the script was nearly twice as long, and we ended up cutting out interactions that felt redundant, and cutting out some of the things that provided more of that context of the larger world in which these interactions resided, and that was just an unfortunate sort of reality of our production schedule and budget.
Are you interested in 3D dimensions interface? So for me, it looks like a great interface to experience a cloud wave of current day, but interface is.
Yeah.
Are you interested in 3D?
So so the question is, what about 3D? And there is, I think, I wouldn't describe this as a strictly 2D interface because it does have a depth component to it. It's more like sort of 2.5D because your point of view is fixed. You have objects kind of drift away from you along that z-axis over time, but you can't pivot. You can't really move around in the space in the way that you would in a true 3D environment. And part of that was just to really try to reduce to some extent the variables involved, and to limit the complexity of the UI in a way that that would make it so that people could easily interpret what was going on with it. And we felt that a truly three-dimensional space would make it a more complex design problem than really we were ready to solve. So, yeah.
So, two quick questions. First, I interpreted the stop motion very differently. What I loved about it is, this talk is basically about the production of this video, and I'm thinking about the scripting and what flexibility you leave yourself when you have a person representing a point of view, and then you can go back in post-production and put whatever words you want on them. And at the same time, I'm watching you give this talk where you're bringing in other information to tell us about this. And I just said, you feel like it might be fun to reflect about the production of a future vision video 5 years from now, where you would be able to include in the wiki what we've been contributing, or somehow make it become something else as it should be as time goes forward from when you started building it.
Yeah, well, I don't know exactly how to summarize your comment, but So one of the requirements of that Mozilla had when we started working with them was they wanted everything to be open. They wanted everything to be released to the world. They had tried to partner with other commercial organizations in the past, and they were never able to make those partnerships work because those organizations always wanted to claim some kind of intellectual property rights over the outcome of the output of these projects. And we said, no, that's again, we are all about sharing our ideas, and so everything that's in the Aurora project is released under a Creative Commons license. So to your point about the kind of being able to take the video and do different things with it later, anybody can take these videos and remix them any way they see fit to kind of put their own ideas into the mix, and that was definitely part of what we wanted to accomplish with the project. Yeah.
I'm interested in the absence of very much vocal communication, particularly in the mobile kind of setting.
Yeah. How come?
Your thoughts that didn't get included, and
yeah. So the question is, how come there's no voice in there? And we actually did have a couple of components in the original script where we did show a voice interaction, but the reason why we didn't is really kind of right there in that phrase, showing a voice interaction. It didn't make for a good movie, and we had so much visual stuff that we really did want to show that we gave priority to that stuff. So there were a lot of other kinds of things that we didn't get the opportunity to really get in there simply because we had so much stuff that was really important kind of to give visual expression to, that we wanted to keep the focus on that.
You have a lot of really beautiful visual interactions here, which I like. I was struck by the choice of what was and wasn't there. You show users accessing content in all different ways, but really almost no people providing content. Nobody types anything, nobody takes a picture, nobody puts up in a video. Was that a conscious thing to sort of think of the web as a read-only mode?
So the question of being, how come we don't see anybody publishing to the web? Because that is certainly one of the most important things that people now do on the web. And I think that is another thing that actually was cut from the video. And I would say that the main reason for it was that the interactions that we had worked out for making content available on the web, for publishing content on the web, were very, very similar to the consumption interactions that we had. And when we were looking at where to make cuts, again, we were trying not to show the same interactions over and over again, even though they were taking place in slightly different contexts. Trying to keep the focus on the interactions themselves. And as a result, the bits of the scenarios that were about publishing and sharing more or less fell by the wayside as a result of that.
Just to clarify, this is I guess about 10 years after projecting. Okay. I'm just curious as to what came up in your discussions for the future, such as I see bioimplants could be a very big thing in terms of integrating, I guess, the cyberspace with the reality. It'll be a complete mashup between the two. That could be possibly the eventual future. Did any of that come up in the discussions? Or I'm just curious.
Yeah. So what are some of the future technologies that were discussed in the course of this project? We had this really interesting dynamic among the project team about what constituted forward thinking enough, because what we really wanted was to put a concept out there that was radical, that was breaking convention as much as we possibly could, but we still wanted it to be plausible. We still wanted it to be to feel realistic, and so we had some people who were kind of at one end of the spectrum saying that we'll never see that much technological evolution in 10 years, and other people who are at the other end of the spectrum saying that we weren't going far enough. And so you mentioned the idea of bioimplants as a way of achieving that augmented reality vision. And so in the forecasting workshops that we did with James Garrett, out of that he wrote these three, almost like these little short stories about characters in this world that illustrated these concepts: augmented reality, data abundance, and virtual identity. And in his augmented reality scenario, he had somebody wearing a pair of glasses that kind of gave them this data overlay on their world. And I think that was something that we had a little bit of. It was a little controversial within the project team as to how plausible that was for a 10-year vision. And so we actually ended up alluding to the data glasses. It's mentioned in dialogue in the movie, but we don't actually see them and that was the compromise that we struck, for better or worse. Yeah.
Activity of this foresight forecasting sort of activity informed your existing projects now? Has it made any change in how you approach projects since this activity?
So the question is how did the forecasting activity impact our existing projects? I think that it has been more valuable to us as process than as product, because what we undertook here was to solve a pretty specific problem in a pretty specific context, and we're not pursuing our other projects with this in mind, like we're building toward the Aurora future in some way, because we always want our design work to be sensitive to the specific context that our clients present us with, and we don't want to walk into it with a bunch of assumptions about where technology is headed. Is there a question over here? No? Yeah.
So 10 years is a long time, and the question is, what things do you see could happen sooner?
So 10 years is a long time. What things could happen sooner? Well, I think that in this last segment where we saw the gestural interface, I think that is going to actually happen pretty quickly. We're already starting to see more and more sophistication with these camera-based interfaces that are able to interpret human gestures, and as the processing power improves and as more research is done in that, I think that we're going to get there pretty quickly. One thing that is sort of hinted at in the video is in the first segment, the device that you see the woman use is not actually a mouse. It's a device made by a company called Novint. It's called the Falcon, and it's actually a 3D game controller. But what it is it's being marketed as a 3D game controller. But what it really is a haptic simulator. It can simulate textures and forces, and you can move through this three-dimensional space. And so the presence of that in the video is kind of our way of indicating, we think that there is going to be more of a haptic component to interactions going forward as well. So, yeah.
Proud of asking about things that aren't in there. The thing that struck me the most was you still have the user as primary programmer. So your concepts of context didn't include anything about goal. And the system, therefore, couldn't initiate anything taking into account what the user was trying to achieve. Was that intentional?
So the question is about the user has really continuing to be the primary driver, and the system not really taking over and there's a word, taking the initiative and anticipating user needs in a more sort of fundamental way. Again, I think that because what we were most interested was exploring user interaction being kind of the primary goal of the project. It's kind of like the voice interface thing in that we could have shown intelligent agents at work. It wouldn't have been very interesting to look at. And we really wanted to explore what could be done from a user interface and user interaction perspective. So, yeah.
Does anything get deleted?
I'm sorry?
Does anything get deleted?
When does anything get deleted? Nothing gets deleted, ever. That's.
But it should have like finite source.
Well, maybe. It might have finite server space, but I guess the question is when the volume of space available to you is growing at a faster rate than your ability to fill it, you functionally have infinite server space, right? I mean, if you're looking at networked storage where I've got potentially data that is distributed among a data store at my house, a data store in my pocket, a data store in the cloud, and it's all kind of shifting around according to my immediate needs. What you get functionally is the same thing as infinite storage. So, yeah.
So I'm wondering, it seems like there's an intrinsic tension in digital technologies between the informovore vision of the future where as many different things as possible are present in my fovea and periphery, and the calm computing vision of the future where, there's one vision of my office of the future where everything I'm possibly dealing with is glanceable, and there's another vision of the future where I walk in and my office is completely bare and there's one blank sheet of paper that so I can concentrate. How did you manage that tension? What are your thoughts there?
The tension between having everything available to you all the time versus just kind of having the system choosing the one thing that is most relevant to your needs is one that we really struggled with because I personally am a little pessimistic about the ability of these systems to really accurately give you exactly what you need at the time that you need it. And so we were trying to balance between that vision of abundance and that vision of scarcity in the UI. And that's why we did created this notion of the user being able to convey a context to the system, and the system surfacing elements that are relevant based on that context. Again, I think that from the perspective of this as exploration of possibilities for user interaction, the more stuff vision is a more interesting problem to solve, and provides a richer set of opportunities for design exploration. I think that to the extent that we tilted that way, that was likely the reason. Yeah.
Just following that up, I count at least 75 things on the screen, and I'm totally overwhelmed with finding things. And so I guess with the calm idea of the one that's important, I see you've got clustering and you've got a continuous timeline, but are there any other ideas for grouping this information? Like looking at the 3D perspective, for example, I don't know how far back it goes. So there's not like a scale showing me, is it, you said time, or is it distance, or is there some way to tell, just besides the size of the items?
Yeah, okay, so so the question just being about sort of managing the abundance of objects in the interface. There was something that I found really attractive about this notion that if you give things your energy and you give things your attention, they stay close to you. And when you stop giving them that attention, they kind of start drifting away. So that the people that you fall out of touch with, the websites that you stop visiting, all of those things, they become dim and distant and small and far away from you. Now you can always kind of time travel back there and retrieve those things and pull those things close to you again. But that is kind of one way we thought of managing this. All of these elements that you see in the browser here are all things that the user has engaged with recently, and so they would have a personal resonance for them that they don't have for you because you just see a bunch of screenshots or whatever, right? You're not really because they don't belong to you. So the notion that we were working from was that that energy and that interaction would create a sense that for the user that this would not feel overwhelming because it would all be familiar, it would all be comfortable because it would all be stuff that had been a part of their world very recently. Yeah.
Seems to me that this messiness versus simplicity issue should not be built into the system
There are clean desk people and there are messy desk people. I'm one of the latter. And that should be something that you control, I think, not automatic.
I think that's a really good point and an interesting idea. The notion of you've got clean desk people and messy desk people, and maybe this is a system for messy desk people, and how this system could evolve to be something that would be for that clean desk person who wants that one sheet of paper in the middle of the desk and nothing else. I think is an interesting problem that we didn't get an opportunity to tackle. So.
Yeah, footnote on that. There's a concept of pilot overload. If you show that to the military, they wouldn't like your overload. Pilot really has to focus on surviving, so he really only has up there what he really needs.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else might be managed by his colleagues, but it's basically out of his visual distraction.
The concept of pilot overload, only presenting the information that is really immediately relevant. That's, I think, what we tried to accomplish with with controlling the opacity of objects according to their semantic relevance in context. Again, I think the assumption that we made was that there's going to be a lot of data that people are going to want access to, and they're going to want to make their own choices about whether or not they can see it, and not have the system choose for them to that degree.
What could also be another person, your secretary, quote unquote.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, it could be another
My
person.
wife does that for me.
Certainly, one of the ideas that we talked about was the idea of putting a social layer on the spatial view, such that so when people fall into these semantic clusters the same way as any web resource, so that if you are engaged with a person where you're frequently exchanging links that are about cycling, let's say, and you're frequently sort of sharing photographs of bicycles with them, and you're having chats that are about cycling and stuff like that, that person would fall into kind of a cycling cluster. And then your cycling cluster and their cycling cluster, you could do an overlap and see where the alignment was, and then give priority to the things that are the product of that social intersection, was another possibility that we... Yeah, absolutely. I think there are privacy aspects.
Suddenly in your home, no, you don't. Then you have to clean up before you bring them in. So. Or in your office.
Yeah, there are privacy aspects rampant throughout all of this. The notion of a product that watches everything that you do, all of your interactions with every information resource, every person, every application, pays attention to those, notices those patterns. That's a huge privacy risk. And then also enabling you to share any of that. It's a big challenge, I think that it's going to be one that we're going to continue to struggle with in the future.
Stray thought on that. Did you ask any 17-year-olds if they thought their parents owned all their data?
No, that was actually, we made that law up. There is actually no law that says that parents own all of their kids' data. But in fact, the fact that there is no law, I think, is itself an interesting thing that is going to be something that sooner or later we're all going to run up against. Well, thank you all very much.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.